Before we begin our study, let's go to Heavenly Father in word of prayer. And Dale, if you would you direct our minds in that study? Pray.
Our most loving Heavenly Father, we are truly thankful for this privilege we have of coming together to be with brothers and sisters in Christ, to be able to study Thy Word without fear of persecution. We ask that You would be with each one of us, that we might open our hearts to receive the truth, and that we might participate fully, that we might learn from each other. We're thankful for the good night's rest that we had, and we're thankful for our health. We ask that You would be with each one of us, that we might always give You the praise and glory and recognize that all good things come from Thee. We ask, Father, that You would be with those of our members who are physically sick, that they might be restored to their health, and we ask especially that You would be with the England family at the loss of a loved one, that they might be comforted. And we ask also that You'd be with Tommy Hardis and that family with the situation with his mother, that she might not have much pain, and that family also will be comforted. Help us that we might reach out to them and help them in any way that we can to be an encouragement to them. And we ask, Father, that You would help us, that we'd always look forward to being able to do good things for Thee. We ask, Father, that You'd help us that as we continue to study the book of Daniel, that we might have a full appreciation of those things that You want us to understand, so that we can be better able to serve Thee and to look for opportunities to teach and encourage others, that they might know the joys of being a Christian before it's everlasting too late. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen. Let's look at our questions now in Daniel chapter 7. Questions from Daniel chapter 7. Yes, Jeremiah, what?
Since you were talking about somebody that passed away, just so you know, my principal, Mr. Evans' sister, passed away.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry to hear that. He said his principal, Mr. Evans' sister, passed away. They announced that at school, I guess. Okay, let's look at our questions here from Daniel chapter 7. We'll walk through these, and then we'll step into our study there of chapter 8. In Daniel's dream and vision, there were 4 great beasts that came up out of the great sea. Describe the first beast that came up.
Lion.
Exactly, yeah. He's like a lion, but what else did he have on him?
Eagle's wings.
Exactly, he had eagle's wings. And as his part went along, the wings were plucked off, and he was made to stand like a man, given the heart of a man. Okay. All right, number B there. Describe the second beast.
Bear.
Exactly, and he had 3 ribs in his mouth. He'd come from Steve's ribs, probably. What's that?
Doesn't finish yet.
Yeah, that's right. And in a minute, when we get into chapter 8, we're going to look at a similar set of visions. And pretty much, I think the visions are showing the same message, just a couple of years apart. We'll discuss that here in a minute. But number C, describe the third beast.
He was a leopard.
Exactly, like a leopard there.
4 wings of a bird on his back.
Yeah, 4 wings. Can you imagine that, of a bird on his back?
They had 4 heads.
4. Well, let's look at the fourth one here now, number D. Describe the fourth beast.
He's like a bear.
Yeah.
Dreadful and terrible.
4 wings.
Well, note that. The fourth beast, and this comes from verse 7 now. Dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, and it had huge iron teeth, and it had 10 horns. And in the course of that one of the horns came up, and 3 of them were plucked out. And so how that progresses there. Any questions about those? Let's look at number 2. What was the color of the garment worn by the Ancient of Days? That's right, white as snow. Number 3, what was the number of those who stood before the Ancient of Days?
1,000.
Yeah. You have 10,000 times? 10,000, that's right. Number 4, during Daniel's night vision, who did he see coming from the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days? One like the Son of Man. That is correct. Number 5, in the interpretation of the dreams and visions, what did the 4 great beasts represent?
Which one represents one of the kingdoms that was seen in Nebuchadnezzar's?
Well,
Or did I get that wrong?
Well, no. Actually, the summation of it is what you just said there. the four kings represented the four beasts represented the four kings that would arise out of the earth. And they line up almost with Nebuchadnezzar's. The reason why I say almost is that Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom is not found within these four. But instead, these are given after the fall of Belshazzar. And so it starts with Darius. But as far as everything lining up, though, going from the Greeks to the Medes, Persians, to the Greeks, to the Roman Empire, that's there. Yeah. Number 6, what did the 10 horns of the fourth beast represent? That's right. 10 kings that would arise from the kingdom there of the fourth beast there. And then who would persecute the saints of the Most High and intend to change times and law? That's right. You've got the king who would arise from the 10. He would subdue the 3. And so that one right there is the one that would persecute the saints of the Most High.
He has no name?
Well, not in here. But scholars suggest different men. Okay.
That's what I was asking.
For instance, if you're one thing at least what we looked at, one of the thoughts is that one king that rose up essentially is representative of the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope.
That is
Okay.
back here, but I wanted it up here.
Yeah, at least that's what some say. Okay. Now, when we get into chapter 8 there, and this was something that I had missed when we was looking at chapter 7, but Matthew Henry offers a very good point about one of the beasts that we're going to look at. Remember, one of the things I thought that's very interesting about the vision seen in chapter 7 is you have the kingdom, at least in the order of the prophecy, being established after the fourth king. After that fourth king who would persecute the saints and everything, then the Lord would turn it back over to his kingdom. Well, where I struggled with, at least some of the interpretations that I found, is that, the great persecution was at the hands of the Roman Empire or the Pope. The problem is, though, that came well after the kingdom was given to the saints. When we look at chapter 8, we're going to see a very similar vision, and we're going to see a very similar domination. But Matthew Henry suggests that it's going to represent a fella, and we'll look his name up here in a minute, that lived about 175 BC and persecuted the Jews. And so that kind of offers another possibility that there was someone who was terrible enough to fit the vision point there, that would have persecuted the followers of God prior to the establishment of the kingdom. So just a thought there. We'll look at that. We'll read through a couple things on that here in just a few minutes. Dan.
Like Lansing mentioned previously.
No, if you bring this up, then we've just got to stop.
I'm just saying, this would mean a lot to the people who lived back then. It'd be very
yeah.
important, but not so much that we need to know every detail of every little item today. We can speculate, but it wasn't written to us.
I'll tell you what I thought you was going to say. Lansing said last week, you got to remember, these prophecies were intended for inspired men to interpret,
Right.
as in the apostles.
Yeah.
It's so good.
But you're right, though. In that it was intended for a particular time and a particular understanding.
In whichever man it was, whether you think it's one, I think it's the other, or whatever, it doesn't affect our soul salvation.
Yes.
What's important for us to know is that when this was written, to whom it was written, it meant a lot, and they understood it.
Right. He gave one of the things that we learned from our Daniel study is that while these visions scared Daniel, it gave hope for Israel, or ultimately for salvation, what we know to be the coming of the kingdom. But it gave hope that they were looking forward to. But remember the one we read, chapter 7, made him sick. Made him sick. It was such a magnitude there.
Worrisome.
Exactly. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Gene.
Yeah, one of the refuges that the religious world takes today is that we don't really have to know all there is to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake. We need to know as much as we can.
You're right.
We need to know everything which is necessary for our salvation, but we don't want to hide behind the idea, we don't need to know everything.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. We need to know everything the Bible reveals. And that's very important. Yeah.
Just don't let the knowledge of your lack of understanding in everything stop you from trying to understand everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Constant pursuit and growth.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, let's start now in chapter 8. There's a couple of things that we need to point out in this. If you recall, just stay in chapter 8 there. When chapter 7 begins, it is the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Now, if you'll recall, when we studied through chapter 5, that was the last night of Belshazzar's reign. It was the writing of the wall, and that night, the Persians came in, the Medes, and they took over Babylon. So chapter 5 is from the last day of Belshazzar's reign. Chapter 7 is from the first year of Belshazzar's reign, where Daniel had this prophecy that we saw. Now remember, at this point, Nebuchadnezzar's already passed on. There might have been, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was called something evil, Merodach or something evil. Some scholars say he reigned for about a year in between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. But chapter 7 begins with the first year of Belshazzar's reign. Chapter 8 now jumps forward to the third year, and according to some scholars, the last year of Belshazzar's reign. So what is interesting about this, if Daniel was still in the employment of the king, if he shared these visions with Belshazzar, then the events that took place the last night of his reign should not have been too surprising. If Daniel shared these with him. And we kind of wonder what would be the point. Well, the point was to give Daniel hope, but there was also more purpose to these prophecies than simply for one man. If one thing that we pointed out, that was it, I thought it was chapter 7, but it may be the prophecy in chapter 8. Actually, we get to the prophecy of chapter 8. He'll be sick for many days. But one of these prophecies reading through says that he told them to seal it up, until a later time, that it wasn't for that time. And so let's start with chapter 8 there, this particular one. And we've established this now to be in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar. Pardon me a moment, there was one thing I need to open up here real quick because we're going to need it here in just a few minutes. And I'm going to get to... I'm on Henry? I am on Henry, all right. There we go. Okay. All right, now let's start there in verse 1. And let's begin reading in verse 1. And Dale, if you would, let's start with you and read down through verse 4, please. We get into the New King James. Daniel chapter 8, beginning verse 1.
In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. When I lifted my eyes and saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand, but he did according to his will and became great.
Okay. Let's pause there for a moment, and we're going to take this a little bit differently than we did chapter 7. I want to kind of talk about each one of these, a little more detail as to what these are talking about. Now, when he says there in verse 2 there, all right, actually back up to verse 1 for a moment. He noticed Daniel says, after the one that appeared to me the first time. What first comes to mind is the vision that was reflected in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. But more than likely, this is talking about the one he had during the first year of Belshazzar's reign. Because, the vision came to him, not to Nebuchadnezzar, but to him. So it's probable that that's the one that he's referencing there in chapter 7. So he says that he saw the vision, and imagine all of a sudden you're sleeping, and you find yourself somewhere else. His body was still there, but the spirit in the vision, the spirit of the Lord, had Daniel somewhere else. And specifically, he says he was looking, he was in Shushan, the citadel. Now, essentially, what this is referring to here is this would probably be one of the capitals of the Medo-Persian Empire, or at least what would be the Medo-Persian Empire, one of the capitals there. And he identifies it as being the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. So, Here he is. He's in one of the citadels, one of the capitals there. Now, verse 3 there, he lifts up his eyes, and again he sees water. And what does he see coming up out of the water? A ram. A ram in chapter 8, yeah. Now, notice here, though, what he says. And you think about a ram is not an animal, at least from what I was reading, it's not an animal that attacks. It's not, it's not like a lion or something like that. Somewhat of a docile animal of sorts. But anyway, that's important here in a moment. The ram comes up.
Not ram, then, have you?
No. Just read what?
Don't turn your back to them.
Okay. Just stare him down, right? So notice here he says that the ram had 2 horns. And they were high, but what was the difference between the 2 horns?
One was bigger than the
One
other.
was bigger, one was higher, but one was lower.
You've learned this, haven't you?
No, I just heard what you said.
Okay.
He read it. He listened to the reading.
All right. Now, you're right. One was higher than the other one. Now, what scholars basically speculate, the ram here is representing the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, Belshazzar is still reigning, but notice it's the 3rd year. So this is, according to some scholars, this is the last year of his reign. And it is the Medo-Persian Empire that the ram here reflects. And you've got the 2 horns, one is greater, one is lesser, one is bigger, one is smaller. And it's the Medes that are represented by the lesser, and the Persian Empire that's represented by the greater one. And sure enough, what happens, notice as they came up, the higher one came up last. He says there in verse 4 that I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward. And this kind of reflects the growth of the Persian Empire after it took control there. And observe that no animal could withstand him. No animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand. Notice this, but he did according to his will and became great. All right, this is representing the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire was a great empire. It grew to be very large, but it wasn't the greatest of empires. We'll talk what comes next. Any thoughts or comments about this? Okay, let's continue now with our reading here. So now we have this representing the Persian Empire. Miss Wilma, would you mind reading for us verses 5 through 8, please?
And I was considering, so the male goat came from the west, across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a noble horn between his eyes. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which had been standing beside the river, and made him of furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was smooth with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore the male goat got very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it 4 notable ones came up forward toward the 4 winds of heaven.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go back up to verse 5 now with this. So now we bring into the picture another creature. Now the first one was a ram that came up. This one was a what? Yeah, this one was a male goat. And notice that it says that this one, suddenly male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth. Not up out of the water, but came from the west across the surface of the whole earth. Now, notice the imagery there in verse 5. How was that goat moving?
Without touching the ground.
Exactly. You imagine him moving so fast at such a rate of speed and so mightily, it almost appears to float across. It's just to move across the ground there. Now, this great goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Looked a little bit different, didn't he? We would call him a unicorn, in that uni meaning one, and corn meaning horn, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, the point is, he only had 1 horn. A little bit different, but where was the horn located? Yeah, in the middle of his forehead there. Now, verse 6 there says that the ram that had 2 horns, which he had seen standing by the river, he ran at him with furious power. So here we have the male goat running towards the ram with furious power. I can't talk this morning. And verse 7, then note this. He said, I saw him confronting the ram. And notice what it says. He was moved with what against him? Rage against him. So here you have the domination of the Persian Empire there. And all of a sudden you have coming from the west, you have, I guess, my map, this would be the west over here. You have this goat just coming in with such force and veracity. He's attacking the ram, so much so that he broke his two horns. Now, if he broke his two horns, and the horns represented the Medes and the Persian Empire, what did this goat destroy or break?
Power.
Yeah, the power of the Medes and the Persians. Now, he was so great that there was no power in the ram to withstand him. But he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. And then the last one there in verse 8, he makes the point that the goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken and in place of it 4 notable ones. Let's talk about this particular part of the vision. Yes, Jeremiah, what's your question or comment?
You forgot the other arrow part.
Okay. Now, who represents this? Or who did the goat represent?
Adam Clark suggested it's Alexander the Great.
Yes. He and Matthew Henry agree together with that. And when you look at how the Greeks came into the Persian Empire, they dominated them. And when Alexander, how old was Alexander the Great when he began his campaign? When he became to the throne?
Well, by the age of 30, he had conquered all of Asia.
Yeah.
That's how fast he moved.
I want to say that according to what I read in Matthew Henry makes the point that he was, pardon me just a moment, I hit the wrong button, that he was about 20 when he took the throne, if I remember correctly. And am I Matthew Henry? Yes, I am. Okay, I think I was reading from a different commentary then. Let me check Barnes and Clark. All right. Anyway, he was somewhere around 20 when he took the throne, and what Dale was saying is accurate there. About 36 years old, somewhere like that.
30 years of age.
Right, 30 years of age.
By then, he had conquered all of Asia.
He had conquered all of Asia. So he had gone in as such a young man and had taken the whole Persian Empire. Yes.
With one exception.
Mm-hmm.
He did not conquer Afghanistan. He withdrew from there because he could not overcome it.
Ah, okay.
Neither could the Russians.
That's true.
But they were so tribally oriented, he could not draw them into a single government, and he finally gave up and left.
I had forgot about that from my world history. So when you look at this, you're looking at a great power. You know, to be able to take that much, with the exception of one area there. And it is said that Alexander the Great did what when he realized that there was no more that he could conquer? Said he wept. Yeah. Said he cried because there was no more world that he could take. That there was nothing else that he could go in and conquer. And this fits the process here. You know, just like Nebuchadnezzar's dream, we identified what followed Nebuchadnezzar was the Medo-Persian, and what followed them was the Greeks, led by Alexander the Great. Well, this thing is showing the same thing. The Greeks came in, led by Alexander, came in, and he dominated the Persian Empire there. All right, now, let me jump back to our Bible here for a moment. Observe, though, that regarding this, come down to verse 8 there. He says, when he became strong, the large horn was broken. And it was in place of it 4 notable ones. Any ideas of what that represented?
4 winds of heaven is what it says in Scripture.
Well, yes. 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. Okay. Some scholars say that if this is talking about Alexander the Great, that he died at the greatest point in his life. You know, at the greatest expanse of the Greeks there into that area there. he died, about in his 30s. And from what I read, the kingdom there, what he had conquered, was divided up among the 4 captains. Or at least that's what some suggest. That, or at least factually, the 4 captains did happen in the division process there. Scholars speculate that this is talking about that process, when Alexander the Great died and his 4 captains took control there. Yes, Dan?
I guess it makes sense to say then that these 4 captains went to the 4 winds, north, south, east, and west.
Yeah.
You know, to claim their portion of this conquered land, I guess.
Yeah, and to take what was given them, or ever how it was divided up
Right.
among them. Exactly. All right. Any other thoughts about that? All right. So this is not a new message being given. It's just the same message being reiterated within a vision. And one was given the first year of Belshazzar's reign. Now this one's coming the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign. And it's basically telling what's going to happen after Belshazzar dies, after the great kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar is no more. Okay, any other thoughts? All right, let's see. Let me continue our reading here. And Miss Maxine, would you mind starting there in verse 9? And we're going to read down through verse 12. Let me get us where we need to be here.
Out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to be the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced imposture.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's back up to verse 9 now with this. To verse 9. Now, do you see a similarity between what we looked at in chapter 7 in the prophecy there of the 4th beast and what we're looking at here with this particular beast? Notice here what verse 9 says, that out of one of them, that you have the 4 horns that had taken the place of the great one that had broken. Out of the 4 horns there, one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south and toward the east and toward the glorious land. Okay? I see a question, Ms. Patson.
No, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm thinking Rome.
All right. What do you think? Now here's, based on this translation, the New King James translation, what do you think the glorious land is referencing?
Is it Rome? I mean, that's what's coming to my mind, but I don't,
Okay. Observe that the glory there is capitalized. Judea. Jerusalem. All right. Now, like I said, that's this particular translation. If we were to click over here to the American Standard Version, it simply says into the glorious land without the capitalization there with that one. All right, so, but let's say just for the sake of context of what we're reading here, the glorious land is talking about Jerusalem. All right, it would stand to reason because that Jerusalem, Israel, was part of the Babylonian Empire, although they were allowed to return under the Medo-Persian, under Cyrus's reign. But it was still part of that domination there, or at least was extended down towards that area with this particular individual. Now, the way that it describes it says that it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them, even exalting himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away. Okay, let's think about this for just a moment here, and we're going to look at this somewhat in reverse there, but there's some key evidence, key information in here that we need to remember. First off, look in verse 11. Forget the glorious land we mentioned here for a moment. What does he say in verse 11 this one would take away?
Daily sacrifice.
All right, daily sacrifices. So we're going to remove that. Where were the daily sacrifices?
Temple.
Yeah, held in Jerusalem there. Okay. Where was the place of his sanctuary?
That's Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Okay? So, and it says, because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily sacrifices, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this, and he prospered. Okay? Now, let's think about our history for just a moment of our study through the minor prophets, the latter writing of the minor prophets. When you look at Ezra and Nehemiah, under the reign of Cyrus, I've always pronouncing his name wrong, Lance. Is Cyrus? Said Sirius for a while. Anyway, Cyrus. Under Cyrus, they were able to return home, back to Jerusalem, rebuild the temple. But the temple, after they laid the foundation, went 16 years unfinished. And they finally finished it. They finally restored what God wanted them to do. But by the time Malachi comes around, they were offering sacrifices unacceptable unto God. They were guilty of sin. So, what we may be looking at here is that there was an individual who comes up, and we're going to put forth a possible choice here in just a moment, but a ruler that came up that came in and persecuted the Jews who lived in Jerusalem and prevented them from fulfilling what God had required of them to do. And it was because of transgression, because of their sin. Now, this falls within the 400 silent year period, though. So we have no inspired record as what happened. We just have a secular record recorded by mankind. But at some point, and this is what chapter 7 prophecy doesn't tell us anything about, other than he'd persecute the saints. Well, here we have what might be a matching persecution of those who were God's people. And he did this all, and he prospered. So with him stopping the daily sacrifices and cutting off the sanctuary there, the sanctuary there was cast down, it's very possible then that what we are looking at is Jerusalem. Okay.
There are other scriptures that refer to the same thing, use that phrase, either precious land or glorious land.
Mm-hmm.
One is found in Psalms 106, verse 24, another one is Jeremiah 3, verse 19, but there are two scriptures here in Daniel. You go to the 11th chapter,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see verse 16 and verse 41 uses the same wording.
Daniel
11,
11.
verse 16
Okay.
and verse 41.
Gotcha. I misunderstood something you said there. My fault. All right. Notice this in Daniel chapter 11, verse 16. They're looking at this reference. That he who comes against him shall do according to his own will, and no truth shall stand against him. He shall stand in the glorious land with destruction and power. And then jumping on down into verse 41 there, he makes the point, there we go, that he shall also enter the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. And the Psalms and others uses the same reference there. Okay. So, to me, I think it's safe to say it's Jerusalem. And whoever he's talking about here is going to fall within the 400-year time period where, once again, the Jews are going to be persecuted. He says here because of transgression. But it's prior to the establishment of the kingdom, though. All right, and we'll offer a suggestion as to who this may be. But before we do that, any thoughts or comments? Pardon me. All right, let's look at something here. And let me find it here because it's Matthew Henry, just a different format of it. Anyway, Matthew Henry makes the point when we're looking at the various scenes and the visions here. In talking about the ram with the two horns, we looked at that a while ago. But regarding the ram pushing westward, he talks about that being Alexander the Great, of course, and how great he went through there. But being overcome by the he-goat there. Come on down a little bit farther. And I know you don't see behind me because I'm not working it behind me, sorry. If I can find it here, I'll bring it up behind me, though, because it is Matthew Henry's commentary. And talking about the he-goat, Alexander coming in there, says, but when he was about 32 or 33 years of age, when he was strong in his full strength, he was broken. That would be the time period that he died. Wasn't killed in battle. Wasn't anything like that. Alexander died. Some people suspect poison, but we don't know for sure. He left no child. He left no one to take the throne after him. So he was divided up there among the four of his captains there. So the kingdom there being divided up, he talks about the notable one. And he brings in the idea of a fella by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes. Now let's see if I can find that here for you under this particular version of it. Now this is interesting because, well, Matthew Henry, come down here a little bit. Let's see. Pardon me for scrolling through this so fast. A lot of interesting information in this reading. Won't take the time to read it though. But notice here, let's see, there we go, the little horn here. He brings up this fellow right here, and I thought this was very interesting. We'll put it for the, the people on the internet have been looking at it the whole time. Anyway, he saw a little horn which became a great persecutor of the church and people of God. And this was the principal thing that was intended to be shown to him in this vision, as afterwards. All agree that this was Antiochus Epiphanes, so he called himself the illustrious, but others called him Antiochus Epimanes, I'm not sure about that one, Antiochus the Furious. This particular individual here, because he was in his original contemptible, says there were others between him and the kingdom, and he was of the base servile disposition, had nothing in him of princely qualities, and had been for some time a hostage or prisoner in Rome. Now come down and try not to get too detailed into this reading here. But it says that he waxed exceedingly towards the south, seized Egypt, towards the east, he invaded Persia and Armenia, but that which is here especially taken notice of is the mischief that he did to the people of the Jews. They are not expressly named, or prophecies must not be too plain. He says, but they are here so described that it would be easy for those who understood scripture language to know who were meant. And the Jews, having noticed of this before, might be awakened to prepare themselves and their children beforehand for these suffering, trying times. Anyways, he suggests that it was this fellow. Now, who was this particular individual that he's talking about here? Well, let's go back up a little bit, and let me bring that up for you on the internet here, because I thought this was very, very intriguing in looking at this ahead of time. He made the point, let's see, bring up the handy-dandy Google, and paste that in there. Yeah, and there are several different descriptions here, but we'll pull up the Jewish Encyclopedia here for, let's see. Yeah, I just want a straight definition, so we'll do, that'll be good enough for now, I suspect. All right, notice here, and this is a little bit smaller there in the back. There we go. Let me expand, make it larger for you. Let me know when you can read that.
Oh, that's fine.
That good?
The second was good too.
That good right there? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now, notice here, King of Syria reigned from 175 BC, died about 164 BC. So this would be before the coming of the kingdom. Okay. He was the son of Antiochus the Great, and after the murder of his brother Seleucus, took possession of the Syrian throne, which rightly belonged to it. So it goes on the description there. But what I want to draw your attention to is when he reigned. So if Matthew Henry is right in his assertion and others' assertion, then this great persecution against people of God, so much so where they stopped the where they stopped the sacrifices, he stopped it and took down the sanctuary. This would fit. This would fit the persecution there as a possible option there. And my thoughts is if this fits this one, why didn't he fit the one from chapter 7? You know, of the fourth great beast. But that's a whole other discussion in of itself, though. But anyway, any thoughts or comments about that? Like I said, like we pointed out last week, for us today, it doesn't really matter much, does it? But it does help a little bit to at least be able to have somewhat of an idea of the possibilities. Some people will look at various prophecies in Daniel, though, and they will apply them to our day and time. Say they haven't been fulfilled yet. You know, and they'll interweave them with Ezekiel and with Revelation. And so it helps to have an understanding so that when we encounter those things, we can at least have a measure of understanding so as not to be thwarted by that. Any thoughts?
It's always interesting to, as far as the study of archaeology and digging stuff up, it's really neat study.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make any difference to us as Christians, as far as our faith goes, what they find, what they dig up. But
right.
when they find a name that's been in the Bible that they had no record of before, They dig it up and they say, okay, in this spot where it's mentioned in the Bible, here's this guy's name recorded on this tablet of stone. Then it does kind of make us smile a little bit, you know, that the rest of the world is catching up with what we already knew from God's Word. But one way or the other, it doesn't shake our faith if they don't find the ark, in other words. If they never find Noah's Ark, that doesn't shake my faith.
Right.
But if they did find it, it would make me grin a little bit.
Yes.
You know, but it's because I already knew that it was made.
Exactly. Our faith is in the testimony of the Scriptures,
Right.
not in actual
Exactly.
evidence. Yeah.
But this is interesting to correlate history with the events of the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, and if I'm going to believe one or the other, if I have to discard one, it's going to be man's ideas.
That's right. There is, and we won't take the time to look it up, but I remember I actually have this in a book, a couple of books I have, that there's an obelisk that was found. And it's from the latter days of the southern nation of Judah, if I believe. But it was, and I think it's a Babylonian obelisk, I'm not sure. But anyway, it has mentioned on there one of the actual kings of Judah as having paid homage to whoever the king this obelisk was built to. And so it's pretty neat to find a reference to a biblical character, and not just the same name, you know, but the actual character himself in things that are found.
That event is what I was referring to. I read that same thing.
Yeah.
And it had been found nowhere before that.
Yep.
So they were questioning his existence. You know, as the people who believe the Bible's just a book of fairy tales, they were supporting them that his name had never been found anywhere.
That's right.
And then they dug this up, and his name was found there, so it kind of shut them down for a while. But I don't care. You know, I know the Bible's true.
Well, here's the thing that ultimately we are up against. For us, it's all about faith. Okay, we look at history and we see history through the lens of the Bible, if you would, and so we look for those things which support biblical texts. Not that we need them, but we look for them.
Right.
But when people look at us, they look at us the way that we look at the Mormons. The Mormons look at the history of the United States of America, and they have taken things that they have found, archaeology has found, to say that supposedly this shows that the Mormons, that the descendants of who was it? Nahum? No, not Nahum. No, it was one of the descendants of Ephraim that came over here, and I can't remember. I've drawn a blank now. Anyway, God called them to come over here supposedly, and about 400 BC, roughly, when supposedly God called them to come over here. And what was interesting, if you go through and read this in the Mormon Bible, and I've read it's quite interesting, but it's fiction. When he brought them over here, he brought the law, the tablets that had the law on it, but he didn't bring anyone from the tribe of Levi. It was just the descendants there of Ephraim or Manasseh. They'd both be from Joseph. Anyway, their descendants come over there. And as soon as they got over there, they had to build a temple. They'd offer sacrifice and everything. And so one of the first flaws you see, there's no priest. How do they offer sacrifice without a priest? That's where you're going with this. They look at his archaeological history in the United States and say, see, this shows that we were here. This shows the Book of Mormon to be true, And so for them, it is faith, but they're looking at it through their eyes, the way that it's manipulated for them. So my point is, others will look at us and our faith, and we'll look at archaeological finds and see, it shows it. And they'll make the same accusations. But in the end, what matters is that we believe what the Bible teaches. No matter what we find externally, it's what the Bible teaches. Yeah. But what we found so far is the Bible is accurate. I mean, the archaeological evidence have proven it time and time again, though. So, yes, Pat.
People of the world if they don't want to believe, you could show them anything in this whole wide world that proves, and they'll still choose not to believe. So you do have to live by faith, whether you can prove or not.
Right.
Many people choose.
Well, the story of the rich man Lazarus, the rich man, while in torment, said, hey, send Lazarus back so he can teach my brothers. And Abraham said, your brothers have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. And so what we have is sufficient.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, you did fine. You did fine.
You did well.
Okay. How we got to that, I don't remember, but that's okay.
I think it was me.
It normally is, but that's okay. No, it's not that. Sorry. It's okay, though. These makes for good discussions. Okay. Let's see. Anything else with this one? Oh, I know. We were talking about the possibility of who this might have been. It's not real important to us. It doesn't change anything, but it could have been this fella. So, all right. Any thoughts? All right. Let's keep going with this now. Very, very interesting. We have a few minutes remaining there. Let's start in verse 13, and I think it's your turn, Miss Florence. If you would read for us beginning in verse 13, and let's just take 13 and 14 here.
Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the day of sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
Okay. Well, let's look at that for just a moment there. He makes the point there in verse 13. Holy One was speaking, and he said, well, how long will the vision be? Because this is very important. Because in the vision he sees no more sacrifices, the transgression of the desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot. How long? How long is this going to have to last there? And notice there that he makes the point that he says for 2,300 days, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. Now, people who sit down and study the Bible and looking for certain understandings love numbers, and they love it whenever a prophecy gives very specific numbers. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, is it literal or what? Well, one thing to note here on this, let me bring this, find this here for just a moment. Matthew Henry makes a very good thought, at least I thought it was, about this. Let's see. Okay, let me bring this up here now. All right, come over here for just you stay where you're at. I'll bring it up here. All right, let's come down a little bit. We're going to go down to section.
That's a lot.
Yes.
You said a little bit.
I'm sorry. All righty. Now notice here, he makes a couple points here. He talks about there, and you'll see point number 7. He said he heard the time of this calamity limited and determined. Okay, and it's a good thought to bring out. Not the time when it should come. That is not here fixed, all right? But instead how long it would last, okay, during this time period there. Now, come down here. The question asked concerning it in Daniel 8:13, he says, observe by whom the question was put. I heard one saint speaking to this purport, and another saint seconded him, oh, that we knew how long this trouble will last. The angels here are called saints, for they are holy ones. Okay? He makes the point. So the holy merit, so he continues on with this text here. And let's see, where's the explanation of the days here? That's to whom the question was put. And then, how long shall it be? How long shall the sanctuary and the host, the holy place, and all persons that minister be trodden underfoot? All right. Note, the angels are concerned for the prosperity of the church on earth and desirous to see an end of its desolations. Now, notice at least this is his understanding of it. The angels asked for the satisfaction of Daniel, not doubting, but he was desirous to know how long these calamities should last. So it sounds like he takes a position now that the calamities there, that what we're looking about in the prophecy, is applying to what era? Before the church or after the church? Seems after the church is established. Again, I don't know if I can see that in the prophecies, but I haven't studied this for years and years and years and years and jumped to it in details. Because when we were looking at the text here for just a moment, a while ago, it was still under that one horn that had come up, and it was the persecution and everything that was happening. So, the answer to the question is given there, he says, and here's his thoughts on it. Bear in mind, thoughts of man. He says that Christ gives instruction to the holy angels, for they are fellow servants, he says, bear in mind, not inspired. But here the answer is given to Daniel. He said to me, God sometimes come down here. Christ assures him that the trouble shall end. It shall continue 2,300 days, so many evenings and mornings, so many, and he gives the word there, so many natural days reckoned, as in the beginning of Genesis. So he's looking at this as actual days there. So some make the morning and the evening, and this number to stand for 2. And then he says, and people love to do this, and then 2,300 evenings and his mornings will make about 1,150 days, and about so many days it was that the daily sacrifices were interrupted, and this comes near the computation of a time, times, and dividing of a times. Anyway, can you follow this? In other words, he's trying to put it together like many scholars do and say, here it is.
I've got it figured out.
Okay.
It's 12,602 years.
Yikes.
Because how much time is a day to God?
And Henry?
Like 1,000. 1,000 years is like a day.
Some of the commentaries are trying to suggest this is years, some of them are trying to suggest it's days. You go down to Daniel, the 8th chapter, verse 26. He says, in the visions of the evenings and mornings, which was told is true, therefore seal up the vision. Or
Yep.
it refers to many days in the future.
Not many years in the future.
Right.
Yeah. What is 2,300 days, if we take it as each one being a day, evening and the morning being a day, what's 2,300 divided by 300?
6.5 years.
6.5 years. Okay. And so going from that one right there, and going from not the time when Daniel saw the vision, but from whatever point, it's, to me, it would just be saying that since the sacrifices are going to be restored, then it would still be prior to the coming of Christ. It would still be when that fellow that we talked about, whoever he was, lost control, and the Jews were restored back to their position in Jerusalem and going about. Because even when Jesus was on the earth, weren't they still making sacrifices in the temple?
Josephus suggests that the sacrifices were suspended for 3 years.
For 3 years. Well, that would be that takes the other possibility that Matthew Henry points out that evening and morning could comprise 1 day. So instead of 2,300, it'd be 1,100, and so that would put it to about 3 years there. Yeah. And that places it prior to the establishment of the church. Now, as far as Daniel is concerned, the primary benefit is basically your people are going to have more problems, but it will come to an end, and there will be a restoration there. Yeah. Okay. I don't mean to try to bog things down, and sorry for the people watching this. I've left it up there the whole time. I don't mean to bog things down, but it's just interesting sometimes to consider what other people, possibilities with this. All right, any thoughts or comments that we've missed? All right, let's do some more reading here, and let's bring ourselves down farther within this text. The point is here, I'll knock my keyboard off. The point is here is that these visions, the halting of the sacrifices and the removal of the sanctuary, when everything is said and done, it will come to an end, and it's the process here of time and what's going on that he is revealing to him. All right, let's see, where did we leave off at? Verse 14, didn't we? All right. Gene, would you mind start reading for us there in verse 15? And let's read verses 15 down through... Let's read down through 22, please. Kind of a little longer reading.
Then it happened, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and were seeking the meaning, that there suddenly stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and stood me upright. And he said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation. For at the appointed time, the end shall be. The ram which you saw, having 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. As for the broken horn, and the 4 that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see if I want to read any more before we talk about this. Yeah, let's go ahead. Ms. Doris, would you read for us 23 and 24, please?
And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, a king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy fearfully, and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty and also the holy people.
Okay. And Ms. Rita, would you read for us 25 through 27, please?
Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper under his rule, and he shall exalt himself in his heart. He shall destroy many in their prosperity. He shall even rise against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without human means. And the vision of the evenings and mornings which was told is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick for days. Afterward I arose and went about the king's business. I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it.
Okay. One thing I want to note, because we're nearly out of time, and we're going to look at this a little more next week, but notice the very end of this. He still was about the business of the king. He still worked for Belshazzar. And when he says, I was astonished by the vision, but no one understood it, almost suggests the possibility that he talked about it with other people. Possibly. Or he could simply be saying it was so great that no one, even if he had talked to others, would not have understood it. But just that thought kind of occurred there right at the end. What we'll do is we'll start next week with verse 15 there. And 15 down through 22 is real simple. He basically says, here's what it is. Everything we've been talking about brings it forth there. But it is 23 through 26 that we want to spend a little bit more time on as well, because of just what it has to say in the explanation there. All right, any thoughts or comments about this? All right, I appreciate all your participation. Let's plan next week to start at verse 15. And like I said, we're going through a quick discussion of those. And then we'll slow down about 23 there of Daniel chapter 8. And if we get far enough, we'll do questions for Daniel 8 next week. Any other questions or comments? Let's remember to keep the England family in our prayers. And tonight we're still planning to have the Scriptural Way broadcast at 7:30 at scripturalway.org. Again, we appreciate everyone being here. For those who have joined us online for the study, thank you very much. If you would, let's bow our heads in a word of prayer. And Gene, would you mind leading us in that prayer, please?
Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful to Thee that we've been able to spend this time together to study from Thy holy word, to understand the things which Thou would have us to know as we serve Thee in this life. We pray that Thou would be with us, that would forgive us our sins. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.